We're alone. In an uncharted part of the galaxy. Somewhere. Along this journey. We'll find a way back.
30 years ago this year, Star Trek Voyager premiered on January 16th, 1995 to 21.3 million viewers, with the feature-length episode Caretaker. Voyager was UPN's flagship series, and the first to premiere on the brand new television network backed by Paramount. It was the first time a live-action Trek series premiered on a television network instead of first-run syndication since the original series in 1966. Star Trek Voyager follows the joint Starfleet Maquis crew aboard the Federation starship USS Voyager, as they traverse uncharted space on their lengthy journey back to Earth, after becoming stranded in a distant part of the galaxy. As with DS9, the show opens with an on-screen situational overview to establish the necessary backstory for those unfamiliar with the Maquis from TNG and DS9. From there, it immediately depicts a Cardassian ship chasing a Maquis raider through the Badlands, where we are introduced to our first main characters, Chakotay, B'Elanna Torres, and Tuvok. Although their roles aren't explicitly outlined yet, we are also graced with an appearance by Gully Vec, a recurring character from DS9 and TNG. The newly christened Intrepid-class USS Voyager, on its maiden voyage, departs from Station Deep Space Nine in search of a Maquis ship that's gone missing in the nearby Badlands. Bigger than most science vessels, but significantly smaller than a Galaxy-class ship like the Enterprise D, only carrying a crew of about 150, Voyager is the most advanced ship in the fleet at the time of its launch, and among the fastest, with a sustainable warp speed of warp 9.975, just below the theoretically impossible warp 10 threshold. Voyager uses bioneural circuitry to speed up processing, along with geometric warp nacelles that raise to improve engine efficiency and reduce known subspace damage caused by high warp velocity. Voyager is under the command of Captain Kathryn Janeway, in her first command. She recruits a failed Starfleet officer who turned Maquis, Tom Paris, from a Federation penal colony to assist in locating the missing Maquis ship. When a massive displacement wave chases down Voyager, the ship is whisked to the other side of the galaxy, to the unexplored Delta Quadrant, 70,000 light-years from home, a journey of 75 years at traditional warp speeds. The force crossing badly damages the ship and kills much of its crew, including most of its senior officers. We see right away that Janeway is a hands-on, strong-willed leader. Despite the dire situation, she doesn't skip a beat as she assesses the situation and directly involves herself in preventing an imminent warp core breach. Upon arriving, they discover a massive array directing energy pulses to a nearby planet. Soon after, the entire Voyager crew is abducted and probed. One crewman, the brash young Ensign Harry Kim, isn't returned with the rest of the crew. Janeway makes contact with Commander Chakotay of the Maquis ship, also pulled into the Delta Quadrant. Where it's discovered they share a common problem, with Maquis engineer B'Elanna Torres also missing. Our partnership commences between the two crews to locate their missing members and get back home. From here, the story shifts to the Ocampa, a peaceful alien species living in a protected subterranean paradise beneath the surface of the planet, receiving the array's directed energy pulses. Here, we find the missing crew members, who are under the care of the indigenous Ocampa after developing a terminal illness caused by the Caretaker's medical experiments. The Caretaker is a powerful sporocystine lifeform who has been looking after the Ocampa in a godlike fashion for almost a millennium, guilt-ridden after accidentally decimating their planet, settling a debt that could never be repaid. The Caretaker's behavior has recently altered. Along with abducting people from across the galaxy, the energy pulses directed from the array have been increasing to stockpile reserves. En route to Ocampa, Voyager encounters a rogue scavenger named Neelix, who barters to help locate their missing crew. Upon arriving on Ocampa, we learn that Neelix has his own objective, to rescue his lover Kes, one of the rare Ocampans to make it to the surface, from the Kazon Ogla, one of the many sects of the Kazon species, with each sect competing to control regions of space like Gaines do territory. This selfish act threatens Voyager and engrosses it into a continuing conflict with the Kazon. With the help of Kes and a reluctant Neelix, both missing crew members are rescued, just as the energy pulses from the Caretaker's array turn to weapons fire, striking the Ocampa's surface to seal off the ancient conduits. The Caretaker's motivations are revealed. He's dying, and in an effort to continue caring for the Ocampa after his death, he has been desperately seeking a compatible mate to procreate with by pulling ships across the galaxy. Realizing his death is imminent, the Caretaker activates the array's self-destruct sequence to prevent the Kazon from benefiting from its technology. Following the Caretaker's death, Janeway is determined to fend off the advancing Kazon from seizing control of the array and protect the Ocampa. The Kazon offensive destroys the Maquis ship, and his crew beamed aboard Voyager. When the array's self-destruct sequence is damaged by a colliding Kazon ship, Janeway destroys the array, cutting off their way home and stranding both crews. Before setting off on their long journey home, Janeway integrates the Maquis crew into her own, selecting the Maquis leader, Commander Chakotay, a former Starfleet officer, as her first officer. She also elevates Tom Paris to the field rank of lieutenant to become the ship's con officer.
Not enough time!
As an episode in general, Caretaker is certainly not going to place high in anyone's episode ranker. It does extremely well as a series premiere, however, and there is a lot going on to keep the plot moving. A series premiere is always difficult to pull off because it needs to introduce the show's premise and characters, all while telling an interesting story. In that capacity, Caretaker serves well as a premiere episode. Most would rank it ahead of TNG's series premiere, but below DS9's, although I personally think it's stronger than DS9's Emissary, mostly because of the pacing and direction. I would put Enterprise's Broken Bow even higher. Emissary probably has a better story, but it feels cheaper than Caretaker. Most estimates do put Emissary's budget at almost half that of Caretaker, $12 million versus $23 million. But that doesn't tell a complete story. Caretaker was produced 2 years later, and had major reshoots because of changing Janeway's actress from Genevieve Bujold to Kate Mulgrew, in addition to changing Mulgrew's hairstyle to her signature bun after already shooting with her hair down. On the other hand, most of Voyager's sets were repurposed from TNG, which may have saved its premiere production budget, compared to Deep Space Nine's necessity to build almost all of its sets completely from scratch. There are a few spots that seem to drag on, but generally, Caretaker moves along quite well. Some of the scenes are shot extremely well, almost cinematic. One example of this is the introduction between Janeway and Paris, where the characters approach from a distance towards the camera in a single, uncut dialogue. There are some issues with the script and general plot, as well as some of the visual effects. I have always felt the visual effects of Caretaker were subpar for a big-budget premiere episode, even though it received an Emmy Award for them. There are some scenes that are great, including much of the climactic battle sequence, where there is camera movement following multiple battling ships, but some shots are very basic, and very tight for some reason. The opening Cardassian chasing the Maquis raider through the Badlands is a good example of this basic movement. Neither ship maneuvers all that much. The most glaring fault of Caretaker is the plot hole that strands Voyager in the Delta Quadrant in the first place, which has been hotly contested. Janeway's decision to destroy the array is a clear violation of the Prime Directive, Starfleet's General Order 1, which governs the interference of alien cultures. Doing so directly interfered with the natural events that would have occurred without a Voyager's presence, preventing a potential power shift for the Kazons that would have otherwise transpired. With no prior knowledge of that region of space, Janeway had no way of understanding how the consequences of her actions to destroy the array would ripple through the region. Warned of this potential violation by Tuvok, Janeway incorrectly justifies that the Prime Directive doesn't apply, since they were already involved in the Ocampa Kazon affair. As a consequence, one of her first major decisions as captain is one of her worst command decisions. Even so, Voyager's fate may have been sealed regardless. There is no absolute guarantee they would have been able to fend off the Kazon long enough to activate the protocol that would send them back home. Tuvok mentions it would take several hours. There would have been a better way of executing the same dramatic effect while making the self-sacrifice more honorable. What if the array's imminent destruction was known right away, even before rescuing Kim and Taurus? It then becomes a race against time. Saving the missing 2 crew members could be at the expense of getting home. Janeway still faces the same significant decision, with a bigger moral dilemma of leaving 2 behind to get the rest of her crew home. The whole water desperation subplot is also peculiar. It's not very believable that warp-capable vessels can't locate water on a reachable planet, moon, or even a comet that doesn't trespass on someone else's territory. It's mostly a mechanism to depict the Kazon as inferior to Starfleet. It would have made much more sense for the Kazon to be lacking something more rare, like dilithium or deuterium, although that is a common trope in Trek. The Klingon wannabe Kazon in general are a weak antagonist, and drag down the series for much of its first 2 seasons. With few exceptions, they are more of a nuisance than a true threat. In some ways, they feel comparable to the Ferengi of the Next Generation, originally intended to be a vicious antagonist, only to fall flat. We'll get more into that in another segment. When examining their role only in this episode, they overall serve their purpose, even if they don't appear all that threatening. Maj Jabin, the leader of the Kazon Ogla, seems to be a capable leader and is portrayed well by Gavin O'Herlihy, although it is odd that the primary Kazon antagonist of the series is Maj Kulla from the Kazon Nistrum sect. It would have been more appropriate to introduce Kulla and then Nistrum here, DS9 did with Gul Dukat during its premiere, or to carry the Ogla and Jabin onward. This feels like disjointed foreplanning. We'll take a deeper dive into the characters in another segment. For now, let's briefly touch upon each character's introduction into the series based on this premiere episode. Chakotay, B'Elanna Torres, and Tuvok are the first characters introduced on screen, although their roles aren't explicitly outlined until much later. One could easily discard them as guest characters. In general, it is hard to distinguish who the main players are. Some of those introduced as main characters are quickly killed off. What's interesting about Voyager's crew is that 4 of its senior staff are only elevated to that capacity because of their unique circumstance. Of the original senior staff, Janeway and Tuvok are the only to survive the journey to the Delta Quadrant. Chakotay, Taurus, and Paris were all former Maquis renegades. Kim was fresh out of the academy on his very first deep space assignment. The holographic doctor was only intended to temporarily supplement during a medical emergency. Neelix and Kes, Delta Quadrant natives, aren't exactly senior officers, but still key personnel. Guest star Scott McDonald as Ensign Rollins, who we never see again on screen, but is mentioned, outshines most of the main cast. The actor does portray several other Trek characters, most notably Dolam, the recurring Xindi reptilian on Enterprise.
Captain Catherine Janeway of the Federation starship Voyager.
A very impressive title. I have no idea what it means.
Kate Mulgrew as Captain Catherine Janeway truly shines. She's no comparison to the soft-spoken Bujold originally cast in the role.
Do it.
Do it. Red alert.
Red alert. Move us away from it, Lieutenant.
Move us away from it, Lieutenant.
Mulgrew is Janeway. She owns the role from the very beginning, brilliantly blending compassion with authority, able to convincingly play both spectrums in the same scene. One of the show's most important scenes is easily overlooked, that of Janeway bidding farewell to her fiancé Mark from her ready room. It establishes that Janeway herself suffers strong personal loss when Voyager becomes stranded. It attempts to portray her decision to destroy the array as a personal sacrifice. The scene is also important in presenting Janeway as a well-rounded character, by exhibiting Janeway's sensitive side to counterbalance her authoritative command style, transitioning between the two in the very same scene, which Mulgrew performs exceptionally well. In some ways, this is similar to Picard's observation lounge scene with Riker in Encounter at Farpoint, where we get to see he's not a cold-hearted prick at heart. Another comparable scene in terms of portraying Janeway's tender side comes out at the end of the first part, with Tuvok in her ready room. She is noticeably disturbed about the situation, showing particular compassion for Harry Kim.
He'd left his clarinet behind. She wanted to know if she had time to send it. I had to tell her no.
Then she turns her attention to concern of her longtime friend Tuvok, in what is probably the most emotional scene of the episode. Of the principal cast, which amusingly consists of 3 Roberts, Robert Duncan McNeil probably stands out next to Mulgrew during this premiere episode in his portrayal of Tom Paris. His character is the most fleshed out and is given significant screen time, present in almost every major scene. In a sense, his character is the only one with an on-screen backstory. Trek fans know that his character was heavily inspired from a character McNeil previously portrayed in TNG's 5th season episode First Duty. It's the same character in all but name, which was only changed to avoid royalty rights. In some ways, Paris is the Ensign Rowe of Voyager. We learn right away that he has a troubled history, which earned him a dire reputation. He's rudely treated by most of the crew, Starfleet and Maquis, who don't respect him or want him aboard. He's portrayed as selfish and immature, also a ladies' man, but we soon see he's more than meets the eye. We see that he's bothered by his past mistakes. He's compassionate and responsible, taking initiative without being asked.
All I had to do was keep my mouth shut and I was home free. But I couldn't. The ghosts of those 3 dead officers came to me in the middle of the night and taught me the true meaning of Christmas. So I confessed.
Following the death of several key officers, Paris essentially becomes Janeway's acting first officer until Tuvok comes aboard. Later in the episode, he risks his own life to go back to save Chakotay, who showed animosity towards him earlier. This is a selfless act. As would become the norm, Robert Beltran's Chakotay is barely present during the episode. A surprise considering his role as commander of the Maquis ship and eventual first officer. Beltran plays the composed Maquis leader well enough with what he's given. His character is arguably the most underutilized first officer in all of Trek, something the actor has been quite vocal about. It is a lost opportunity for interpersonal conflict between Janeway and Chakotay, which is only demonstrated on rare occasion throughout the series. Tim Russ as Tuvok is more of a background character until his touching scene with Janeway at the end of the first part. It's ironic that the most emotional scene involves a Vulcan. He does have a bigger role during the second part, seemingly replacing Paris at Janeway's side. Russ immediately has his Vulcan character down. Playing a Vulcan without coming off stiff is one of the hardest roles. Russ excels at this. No one can succeed Leonard Nimoy, the man who created Vulcan mannerisms, but Tim Russ is a good study by taking what Nimoy developed and making it his own.
What do you think you're doing? Who is she to be making these decisions for all of us?
Roxanne Dawson plays B'Elanna Torres as a moody teenager. She improves quite a bit in the follow-up episode Parallax, but it's not until about the 3rd season that her character seems focused. Whether intentional or not, she comes off unsure of herself.
On my very first mission, I'm gonna die.
Good old Ensign Kim, played by Garrett Wan, Voyager's character the writers love to torture, which starts right off in this premiere episode. Like most of the series, his character is a plot device more than anything else, humanizing the stakes, a source of tragedy for a young officer being inflicted by a terminal illness and then becoming stranded on his very first mission. While he has some good scenes, taking charge of the situation in the sickbay is Kim's best scene of the episode. It shows he's more capable than is previously demonstrated by his tongue-tied anxiousness earlier, although I'm not quite sure how he knew how to activate the EMH so effortlessly, when Voyager is supposedly the first to feature this novel technology. He must have read that in some technical manual.
Please state the nature of the medical emergency.
Robert Picardo plays the Emergency Medical Hologram, or EMH, who will become known simply as the Doctor in the series, when he's indecisive of a name. In triaging and treating the injured crew, we see that he's extremely capable, despite having an abrasive personality. The Doctor will become a series fan favorite, fulfilling much of the same purpose as Data's character from The Next Generation. Ethan Phillips as Neelix is supposed to be the show's comedic relief, on the same level as Quark for Deep Space Nine, but he comes off annoying and not at all endearing. This is witnessed right away, and will unfortunately be commonplace for the character, especially during the first couple seasons. and it gets even worse from here. Neelix's romantic relationship with Kes, who is basically the equivalent of a teenager, is cringy, and the love triangle that later ensues, Paris, makes it even more cringy. It would have made much more sense for her to be more of a surrogate daughter to Neelix. None of these shortcomings are the fault of Phillips. It's the fault of the character. Phillips actually delivers an outstanding performance for what he's given. His character does begin to redeem itself beginning in the 3rd season, and almost becomes likable later in the series.
Come with me, we'll find your people.
Played by Jennifer Lean, Kes shows a lot of potential that is sadly wasted in the series. Her character is an interesting, although complicated concept. In many ways, her telepathic abilities sidelined her, much the same way as Consular Troy in The Next Generation. The writers didn't know what to do with her character, and her relationship with Neelix, as previously mentioned, comes off cringy. That, along with Lean's personal struggles, partly contributed to her later departure from the series. Most of the USS Voyager sets were repurposed from the Enterprise D, which themselves were originally built for Star Trek Phase 2 in the late 1970s. They were given new finishes, from the bright, warm colors of the Enterprise D to a darker, cooler color palette, and the windows were altered to match Voyager's exterior shape. Sickbay is the most noticeable repurposed set, with the layout being almost exactly the same, minus moving the main diagnostic bed from the center of the room to the rear. The other sets had enough changes beyond cosmetic, where you do really have to look to notice the similarities. Engineering is clearly the same, minus the pool table, with an expanded second level. The warp core is sleeker, which opens up the set, with the ability to walk all the way around it. The mess hall steals from the 10 forward set, but the gathering space is smaller, and the bar area now contains a kitchen. The corridors and quarters are also clearly repurposed from the Next Generation. The briefing room, which we don't see in this premiere episode, and the Red Room sets both stole elements from the former 10 forward set. Although it was essentially the same size as the Enterprise D's bridge, flipped to be wider than longer, Voyager's bridge set was entirely new for the show. Voyager's sets hold the test of time. While the Enterprise D feels more luxurious and comfortable, it is also dated by its 1980s styling cues. Much like the 1960s aesthetics date the original Enterprise. The previous Enterprise sets are more iconic, but I personally favor Voyager's bridge of them all. It's cosmetically appealing and practical. It feels more cinematic, designed for panoramic perspectives, perhaps anticipating feature films, or switch to widescreen high definition. Having 3 distinct levels instead of 2 adds greater perspective, and making the levels accessible by steps instead of swooping ramps improves the flow between the levels. The only thing I don't really like are the 2 side consoles. They work, I guess, but I feel squeezed in at the last minute. Caretaker was nominated for 2 Emmy Awards for its musical score, winning 1 for Jared Goldsmith's main title theme. Goldsmith is always talented, and I would argue the most iconic Trek composer. Also nominated for his contribution, Jay Chataway composes the episode itself. With 191 Star Trek scoring credits to his name, Chataway is my favorite Trek composer that never scored one of the feature films. From scoring the beautiful and emotional theme from The Next Generation's The Inner Light, to the comedic pieces of Deep Space Nine's Our Man Bashir, and to the bombastic pieces from Voyager's own Scorpion. Despite its minor faults, Caretaker is excellent as a series premiere, easily the top 1 or 2 premiere of the entire franchise. Every time I see it, I think I'm more and more impressed by it. It has the most depressing conclusion of the premieres though. Janeway's ending monologue does feel uplifting and hopeful. Caretaker gives each main character a proper introduction, while telling an interesting story. Cinematically shot, it's fast-paced, but slows down just enough to keep it from feeling intense. The stakes are extremely high. Getting home. And those stakes are lost, stranding the crew 75 years from home. Granted, they had an opportunity to get home had Janeway not felt compelled to help the Akampa at the expense of getting her crew home. Poor judgment indeed, but Janeway demonstrates on more than one occasion during Caretaker that she is a competent and confident leader. By the way, did you ever notice this fine detail of the tri-cobalt explosives being in 3 pieces? The setup of merging 2 disjointed crews, Starfleet and Maquis, is very similar to Deep Space Nine's merging of Starfleet and Bajorn crew. but unfortunately not executed nearly as well, with some missed opportunity for interpersonal conflict that Deep Space Nine pulls off much better in the end. For two crews that are supposed to be at odds with each other, they blend way too seamlessly.
Set a course. For home.
If you like this content and want to see more like this, support the channel by subscribing and following. Check out these other videos, or visit strekonline.com for even more content.